The world of Breaking Bad is a loud place. It's a world of men who scream. Tuco Salamanca beats people bloody in fits of howling rage. Hector rings his bell like he's trying to shatter it. Gunfire, explosions, fury. In this universe, violence announces itself. It gets loud. And then, in the prequel, a man arrives who does the exact opposite. He walks into that same world of screaming men, and he smiles. He cracks jokes. He cooks dinner and hums along to the radio. He asks about your family and he seems to mean it. His name is Lalo Salamanca, and he is, by a wide margin, the most terrifying character the entire franchise ever produced. Not because he's the most violent, he isn't. It's because of a single deliberate choice the show makes with him, one you feel in your gut long before you can name it. Lalo Salamanca never raises his voice. And this is the story of why that quiet is so much scarier than any scream. To understand why Lalo is different, you first have to understand the family he comes from. Because the Salamancas are the loudest, most volatile force in this whole world. There's Tuco, his cousin, a meth-addicted enforcer who is basically a live grenade. Tuco beats one of his own men to death over an imagined insult, radiating the constant threat that he might go off at any second over anything at all. His violence is pure impulse. You can see it coming because you can always see him losing control. There's Hector, the uncle, so consumed by bitterness and hatred that even after a stroke robs him of speech, he communicates entirely through a bell he rings like a weapon. And there are the cousins, Lionel and Marco, two silent twin killers who move like a single machine and treat murder like a chore. They aren't loud, but they're empty, cold and mechanical with nothing behind their eyes at all. That is the Salamanca brand. Rage or emptiness, screaming or nothing. For decades, the family's power rested on one simple promise. We are brutal, we are unpredictable, and we will hurt you without a moment's hesitation. Everyone in this world learned to fear that promise. And then Lalo walks in and breaks the entire mold. The first time we meet Lalo Salamanca, he isn't threatening anyone. He's in a kitchen, cooking, tasting the sauce, singing along to music on the radio. He's warm, he's funny, he's genuinely charming in a way no Salamanca has ever been. He asks people about themselves and actually listens. He laughs easily, a big disarming grin under a neat mustache. He compliments your cooking, jokes with your crew, makes you feel, for a moment, like the most interesting person in the room. If you met him at a party, you'd like him. You'd want him to like you back. This was a deliberate creation. The actor, Tony Dalton, has said Lalo wasn't originally written to be this charming. Dalton chose it. He wanted to play a cartel villain who was loose and playful and mischievous, the way Saul Goodman is, but aimed in a much darker direction. He drew on characters like Samuel L. Jackson's Hitman in Pulp Fiction, men who can be joking one second and lethal the next. He even softened the character's accent to suggest a privileged, educated upbringing, a man perfectly comfortable in any room he walks into. The result is a villain who doesn't feel like a villain. He feels like a friend. And that is exactly the trap. Because everything warm about Lalo, the smile, the jokes, the easy charm, is not the opposite of his menace. It's the delivery system for it. Think about what charm actually does to you. It lowers your guard. You don't brace yourself against someone who's making you laugh. You lean in. You relax. You start telling them things. That's the first layer of why Lalo works. A man screaming at you trips every alarm you have. You know precisely where you stand. You're in danger, and every instinct snaps into focus. But a man smiling at you, cooking for you, asking how your kids are doing, quietly switches those alarms off. By the time you realize you're in danger, you've already let him all the way in. The second layer is worse. With Lalo, you can never read the room, because his face gives you nothing to read. A furious man tells you the temperature. When he's calm, you're probably safe. When he's shouting, run. His mood is a gauge. Lalo has no gauge. He is exactly as pleasant while he's deciding to spare you as he is while he's deciding to kill you. The smile before he shakes your hand and the smile before he shoots you are the same smile. So you never get to relax, and you never get a warning, because the warning signs everyone else in this world gives off, the raised voice, the flash of anger, simply never arrive. He has taken the one tool people use to measure a threat, human emotion, and removed it completely. And a threat you cannot measure is a threat you cannot outsmart. You can only hope he happens to like you. And here's the uncomfortable part. It doesn't only work on the characters, it works on us. Watch how audiences respond to Lalo. People love him. He's a fan favorite, quoted and celebrated and adored, despite being, on paper, a remorseless murderer who guns down an innocent man in cold blood. We know exactly what he is. We watch him do monstrous things, and we still grin every time he walks on screen, still catch ourselves rooting for him, still get a little thrill from that mischievous smile. That reaction is the show running the exact trick on its audience that Lalo runs on his victims. His charm disarms us the same way it disarms them. We lower our guard because he's a delight to watch, and in doing so, we prove the whole point. The most dangerous thing about a charming predator isn't what he does to the people who fear him, it's what he does to the people who like him. And by the time the show is ready to hurt us with him, we have been happily liking Lalo for 2 full seasons. The show proves all of this with a scene where he never fires a single shot. In the final season, Lalo travels all the way to Germany, hunting for a way to expose his rival Gus Fring. He tracks down the widow of a man connected to Gus's secret operation, a grieving woman named Margaret, and he simply sits with her in a bar. And he is perfect. Kind, attentive, funny, gentle. He listens to her stories about her late husband. He makes her smile through her grief. He is, by every visible measure, a lovely man being lovely to a lonely woman. And the entire time, he is coldly extracting the exact information he needs to destroy his enemy, using her pain as a tool. No threats, no violence, just charm, aimed with surgical precision at a vulnerable person who never suspects a thing. It's one of the most quietly disturbing sequences in the show, because it proves that Lalo doesn't need a gun. The gun is his crudest instrument. His real weapon is his warmth. And when that warmth does turn, it turns without any change in temperature. Earlier in the story, a small army of hired killers storms Lalo's home in Mexico in the dead of night to assassinate him. His staff, his cook, the people who work for him are murdered. Lalo escapes through a hidden tunnel, and then, calm as ever, he turns the tables and kills the attackers one by one. But watch the detail the show insists on. Afterward, Lalo grieves. He is genuinely wounded by the loss of his people. He cared about them. That's the unsettling part. He isn't a hollow monster like the cousins. He feels things deeply. He loves his family, mourns his staff, laughs from a real place. He is a complete human being. He just also happens to be able to kill you between one warm sentence and the next, and feel perfectly fine about it afterward. He does a smaller version of the same thing to Saul Goodman. When Lalo needs his bail posted, he sends the lawyer on a brutal errand to haul $7 million in cash out of the middle of the desert. A nightmare trek through heat and gunfire that nearly kills the man. And there's a strong sense that Lalo didn't just need the money. He wanted to watch Saul walk through fire, to test him, to enjoy it a little. To Lalo, the people around him are toys as much as they are tools, and he plays with them wearing the same relaxed smile whether they live or die. And none of it would land if he were only charming. What makes Lalo genuinely dangerous is that behind the smile sits the sharpest mind in the entire story. He is the one person on either show who looks at Gus Fring, the respectable chicken restaurant owner everybody else trusts, and simply refuses to buy it. While the DEA, the cartel, and Gus's own bosses all see a legitimate businessman, Lalo sees a liar, and he is right. He quietly pulls threads nobody else even notices, tracing a dead engineer and one suspicious phone call all the way toward Gus's deepest secret, the hidden super lab. The end credits of one of his episodes are literally titled, "Nothing Gets Past Lalo." That's the full picture. A man with the warmth of an old friend, the patience of a hunter, and a mind that sees straight through everyone around him. The charm makes him likable. The intelligence underneath it is what makes him lethal. All of this points to the deeper reason the show made him quiet, and it's really a truth about fear itself. A person who screams and rages is, in a strange way, offering you comfort. Their noise is proof that they've lost control, and a person who has lost control is predictable. They lash out, they burn hot, they make mistakes. You can see the storm rolling in, you can duck, you can wait for it to pass. Loud anger has a shape and a limit. Calm is the opposite of all that. When Lalo hurts someone, it is never a loss of control. It's a decision, made with a clear head, and carried out with the same easy steadiness he brings to making dinner. There's no storm to wait out, because he was never emotional to begin with. A raging man might kill you by accident, in the heat of the moment. Lalo will only ever kill you on purpose, precisely when it makes the most sense, with a hand that never once shakes. That is the horror the whole character is built on. We like to tell ourselves that evil looks like rage, that it announces itself, that we'll feel it coming. Lalo is the argument that the most dangerous person in any room is not the one screaming in the corner. It's the calm one, smiling at you, completely at ease, who has already decided how the night is going to end and simply hasn't mentioned it yet. Which brings us to the scene that turned Better Call Saul, a show about a small-time lawyer, into genuine horror. Fans just call it The Knock. By the final season, Lalo has faked his own death and gone underground, a ghost patiently hunting Gus. And one night, he needs something from his lawyers, Jimmy and Kim. So he comes to their apartment. The scene doesn't even start with him. It starts with Howard Hamlin, a decent, straight-laced attorney who has nothing to do with the cartel world at all. Howard has come to confront Jimmy and Kim about a scheme they ran to destroy his reputation, and he's in the middle of a long, righteous speech about who they really are. He has no idea he is about to die. He doesn't even know men like Lalo exist. On the coffee table, a candle flickers. That is the only announcement. Lalo has slipped silently into the apartment behind Howard. Jimmy and Kim freeze in pure terror, and Howard, oblivious, finally turns and sees a stranger standing in the room. He asks who he is. Lalo, pleasant as ever, says, "Nobody. He's just here to talk to his lawyers." Howard, unsteady and completely misreading the moment, scoffs and tells this stranger he ought to find himself better lawyers. And then Lalo calmly takes out a pistol, screws a silencer onto it while Howard is still talking, and shoots him in the head mid-sentence. Howard drops instantly, his body folding onto the coffee table. It happens so fast and so quietly and so completely without ceremony that for a second your brain refuses to accept what it just saw. There was no argument, no threat, no raised voice. A man was speaking, and then he simply was not, and the man who ended him never even changed his expression. Then Lalo turns to the two horrified people still alive in the room, gently shushes them, and says he'd like to talk, as though nothing had happened, because to him, nothing really did. That is why the knock became a legend. Almost every other shocking death in this universe comes wrapped in noise, in buildup, in rage. Howard's is the quietest of them all, and that is precisely what makes it the most horrifying. It's the moment the show proves its own thesis about Lalo in the cruelest way it can find. The scariest violence isn't loud, it's polite. There is, in the entire franchise, exactly one person calmer than Lalo Salamanca, and the show ends Lalo's story by locking the two of them in a room together. Gustavo Fring is Lalo's opposite and his equal. Where Lalo hides his menace behind warmth, Gus hides his behind a mask of mild, boring politeness. Both men are quiet, both are patient, both are lethal. For 2 seasons, they circle each other, the only two players in this world sharp enough and cold enough to be a genuine threat to one another. In their final confrontation, Lalo finally wins. He corners Gus in the half-built super lab, kills his guards, and forces him down into the pit at gunpoint. He has Gus exactly where he wants him. And here, at last, Lalo makes his one mistake, and it's a revealing one. He doesn't just kill Gus, he wants to savor it. He pulls out a video camera to film Gus's humiliation as a gift for the cartel boss back home, turning the execution into a performance. For the first time, Lalo is the one doing the talking, gloating, stretching the moment out. And Gus, cornered, bleeding, seconds from death, does something he has never done in his life. He performs. He unleashes a cold, savage speech straight at the camera, pouring decades of buried hatred onto the cartel that once humiliated him. It is genuinely startling because Gus never cracks. But that's the trick. The speech is bait. While Lalo is caught up watching his great enemy finally lose composure, Gus quietly kicks the lab's power cables loose, and the whole room drops into darkness. In the black, Gus reaches for a gun he had hidden in that lab weeks before and empties it in Lalo's direction. When the lights come back on, both men are hit. But Gus, armored and prepared, will live. Lalo will not. And in his final seconds, bleeding out on the floor of the lab he schemed for years to expose, Lalo does the most Lalo thing imaginable. He smiles. He laughs. Even dying, undone by the one man colder than himself, he finds the dark comedy in it. The performer, beaten by a better performance. That's the last piece of the puzzle. Lalo's warmth was a mask over his menace, brilliant and terrifying, but still a mask, still a performance he had to keep putting on. Gus's calm went all the way down. There was nothing underneath it to slip, and in the end, the real thing beat the act. And then the show lands one last, quiet gut punch, the kind that changes how you see everything that came before. Gus's men take Lalo's body, and Howard's, and they bury them together in a deep hole dug straight into the floor of the super lab. Then they finish building the lab on top of them. The two bodies stay down there, sealed under the concrete, side by side. Now remember what that lab becomes. That super lab is where Walter White and Jesse Pinkman cook their meth through much of Breaking Bad. Every scene in that lab, every cook, every argument, every moment of the show that millions of people watched is playing out a few feet above the corpses of Lalo Salamanca and Howard Hamlin. An entire empire, an entire story, built on a foundation of hidden death, and no one inside it ever knowing it's there. There's one more thread, and it's the darkest joke of them all. Years before any of this, it was Lalo who once gave his uncle Hector a small gift, a bell. The same bell Hector keeps at his side, the bell he rings to speak after his stroke. And at the very end of Breaking Bad, it is that exact bell that Hector uses to trigger the bomb that finally kills Gus Fring. The one man calm enough to beat Lalo is ultimately destroyed by a device set off with Lalo's own gift. Lalo lost, and somehow from under the floor, he still got the last laugh. So when people ask why Lalo Salamanca is remembered as the most frightening figure in a franchise absolutely stuffed with killers, the answer was never the body count. Plenty of characters killed more. It's that he understood something the screamers never did. Real menace doesn't need volume. It doesn't need to threaten or rage or warn you first. It can look exactly like a smile and a good meal and a man who seems, right up until the last possible second, genuinely happy to see you. Lalo Salamanca never once raised his voice. He never had to. That was always the whole point.